Hello, YouTube land. This is Brenton Son coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. If anyone out there has a story that they would like to share on this show, you can contact me at brentonson@gmail.com. I'll leave that also in the description. And basically, give me a brief description of your story and contact information, and I will get back to you as soon as I can, and maybe you can come on the show and tell your story. It could be Dogman, Bigfoot, it could be anything supernatural, paranormal type something. If you think it'd be an interesting story, then don't hesitate to send your story in. And if you don't want to come on the show, sometimes people send their stories in for me to read them and just tell me what you will allow me to say towards your name and where you live and things like that. I still need some contributions from now to the end of this month. It would be very helpful. You can make a contribution by going to the PayPal Me link in the description and click that link. It's super easy to use. You don't need a bunch of information. Real easy to do, and it's very much appreciated. Okay, the flashlight giveaway. Now I have two more flashlights that I'm going to bring up in the next video and another video between now and the 22nd. And then on the 22nd or a day or so afterwards, I will basically tell who the winners are. And everyone who comments will be in the drawing for these flashlights, and it's a way that I can show my appreciation to the fans and those who make it possible for me to do this. And I'm also appreciative of Thru Night for giving me the opportunity to show the lights, and they are super good quality flashlights and what have you. So anyway, from the 22nd to maybe a couple days afterwards, 3 winners will be revealed. Today's guest on the show is Jack. We had Steve Bledsoe on the show maybe a year ago or something like that, and he and Jack was the little brother, about 6 years old. His brother Steve Bledsoe, he shared the Bigfoot stories from Oklahoma farm, and he was around 16 years old, something like that. And they had the dog thrown through the window. They got roared at, and it was very traumatizing. You can tell. Jack will let you know about this activity. It traumatized Jack severely. It was a very, very scary thing for him as a child. In Steve Bledsoe's video, if you tap the screen, a little white dot will pop up in the right top corner. If you click that little dot, it'll give you a drop-down menu. I will put Steve's interview in the menu there, and in some other videos too, but it was something in the title about Oklahoma farm, and something like that. Look for that video. You'll see it. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy this interview with Jack in Oklahoma. All right, Jack. I'd like for you to. We'll just start with you introducing yourself, and then we'll talk about your brother's story and stuff a little bit. Okay.
All right, sounds good. My name is Jack. I'm from Oklahoma. Born and raised in Oklahoma. Been around a few other states and lived overseas a little bit. That's really about it.
Okay. Well, I had your brother Steve Bledsoe on the show,
right,
and he shared some stories about when you all lived. I guess it's out in the country, and now kind of the gist of the story was you all first moved out there, or you was living there, I guess, in there was some rock throwing that was happening to the house, and sometimes something would hit the house. I remember him saying something about he was told not to go up into like a certain area by maybe some older man from the area. He's like, whatever you
Yeah,
do.
he was he owned the land. We were renting the house from him, and it was myself, my brother Steve, and my mother. Um, and he owned the property and the house and everything. And he gave mom really good price on the rent, and there was another stipulation that Steve had to work, like a weekend, a month to help him around the farm and stuff, and with the fences and the cattle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
remember an area that he was told not to mess around in like on top of a hill or something like that?
No, not that I don't remember. I don't know specifically which one he told Steve not to go on. But there was some, it was a pretty big area, and there was some mounds or hills, but there was quite a few of them out there. So I'm not sure which specific one that he didn't want us to go up on.
Yeah, and Steve didn't know why he was saying not to go there either. He would just kind of he
No,
felt like a guy was warning him, don't mess around up there. And
right, yeah,
so Steve, I think, went up there just because he was curious, and
right,
and that might have
yeah,
brought the activity down or something.
yeah, it could have been. I don't know. I don't remember it ever being said to me, but I was just a little kid too. But over the years, I heard that that was there's the outside that little town. There is a pretty popular cemetery, and like an old ghost town that's all run down, and so. Over the years, I always heard, about that cemetery and Indian, burial sites out there. So and everything's pretty close out there. So,
Right.
we don't know if it had something to do with that, if there was actual Indio burial grounds on that property. I think that's what, the old man said was that, that's what was up there. And, I don't know if he was just telling Steve that so he would, scare him away. But, you tell any teenager to not do that, and they're most likely going to go do it anyway, so.
All right. Now, how old were you when you lived down there? And how old was Steve?
Steve is 11 years older than I am. And I had to be between 4 and 5. Maybe 6 at the latest. I was trying to think because I went to kindergarten in that house. I remember always going to on my first day of kindergarten,
Right.
and when we moved from there, I started a different school in like first or second grade. So I had to be around 4 or 5. I was born in December, so either I was 4 in kindergarten or 5 in kindergarten. I don't remember, but yeah, I was between 4 and 5, 6 at the latest.
Right. So you was probably around 5 years old. I think that's what your brother was thinking you were. How long did you live?
Yeah.
How long did you live there? A couple years.
At the most. Yeah, so, like I say, I specifically remembered my first day of kindergarten, and we lived in that house during then. So, yeah, I had to be 5 years old, I guess. I don't have kids, so it's hard for me I have to ask people, how old are they when they walk, and how old were they when they start, kindergarten, that kind of stuff. I don't,
You're around 5 or 6 when you start kindergarten. So your brother was 16ish or so. I think he said that he could drive at the time, but you all didn't necessarily always have a car.
Right. Yeah. Mom. We have different dads. Steve's my half brother, and neither one of them were around, so we only had one car in the family. And our oldest brother, he had already moved out.
Right.
So yeah, Mom had the only car.
And so sometimes he would be walking and stuff. We'll get into that part where he was walking
Right.
sometimes and something was shadowing him off to the side. Well, I mean, we'll go ahead and talk about that, I
Right.
guess. But he said sometimes he was walking on the dirt road going like towards town where he could go to a store or something, and
Right.
out in front of the property, and he'd be walking and he'd hear something. Is real dark, spooky kind of part of the woods by your place
Yeah.
there. He said he would hear
Yeah.
something walking. When he would walk, if he'd stop, it would stop. So it tried to match his footfalls, and it would follow
Right.
him all the way until he got to the little bridge. And he says, as soon as I went across that bridge, it would stop following me, like it wouldn't cross the creek or something. And
Right.
and then he said that later on, his friend contacted him when she heard about the story and said that she had actually seen a Bigfoot at that bridge. Her and some guy was parking or something at that bridge,
Right.
and Bigfoot basically approached their car and scared her pretty bad. But
Yeah. Yeah. That blew my mind when I heard that. Yeah.
oh, so you remember? You remember?
Because well, I remember a few years back, Steve telling me that, it was actually a friend of our cousin, I won't say her name, but, a friend of our cousins that, they went to high school together. And, when she told us that, or when she told Steve that, and, he relayed to me, it just blew my mind because, I always knew something strange or something was not right about that house and about that area. And when we heard that she actually saw it, it made sense. It made sense to me that what else could it have been? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It was just kind of like confirmation.
Right. Yeah. So there was one night where the activity had started. There was something throwing rocks at the house and things, and you all ended up. At first, you all thought it was a prowler, is what Steve was telling me, and you all ended up getting this dog, and it was some huge dog. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just know the story of how we got him, being told to me, but yeah, I didn't know the details of how we got him. I just knew that one day Steve brought home, his name was Gus, and he was a big old, he looked like a German Shepherd, but he was a monster dog. He was really big.
Yeah, really big dog is what he was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and he probably seemed even bigger to me because I was so small, but he was a big dog. I didn't really like him at first. We had a border collie type dog that was kind of like my dog, and but that dog wasn't very friendly when we first got him. He was I was just kind of afraid of him when we first got him.
Yeah, Steve said the dog was like a really kind of a mean dog. It had a really bad temper, and the lady didn't want the dog because of it. And
right.
And after this incident, the dog basically walked around with his tail tucked under, being a big wimpy dog, and he ended up giving the dog back to the woman. But let's talk about the time when I think Steve said that there was something that was started throwing rocks at the house again after you'd had this big, huge dog. I forget what kind of dog it was, but it's one of those real big breeds. And and he said that I don't remember if he said something growled or if it was just the rock throwing that started. and he let the dog out. Do you remember him letting the dog out that night?
Um, no, not specifically. No, I mean I know Gus ran around outside a lot most of the time. He was always outside. So I don't know if Steve just let him out that night or he was already outside.
Okay.
But yeah,
But
he was outside.
Steve said he let the dog out, and the dog
Right.
ran around the house barking, going towards where this activity was taking place. And this is the part that you do remember. You remember the
Yeah.
dog all of a sudden. Can you kind of explain what you do remember of it?
Yeah. Steve, my mother, and I were in the living room, and it was a small house. My mother's bedroom was just off the doorway was just off the living room, and we were watching TV, and we heard a large cry. I can't remember the dog barking, but I remember a large crash and like glass breaking. And so we all jumped up. Steve and my mom. Steve ran in first, and then my mother was behind him, and I kind of stayed in the living room in the doorway. Because it scared me, the loud noise. And then the window was out. There was glass everywhere. And so at first, Steve was like, "What the hell was that? The windows broke, And
Right.
I don't remember if it was my mother or Steve, but one of them mentioned you could hear Gus whining, and they said Gus is under the bed. And so they tried to coax him out, and he didn't want to come out from underneath the bed. He was bleeding once we finally got him out. And he was shaking like a leaf. He was in full panic. He did not want to do anything. Steve finally got him out, and they were trying to figure out how bad he was cut. And he was cut pretty good on his side or shoulder area, and he was bleeding everywhere. Right. And we were all in shock. I don't remember the discussion we had. But you put two and two together. Gus was outside, the windows busted. Gus is inside, shaking and scared to death and bleeding. And so we don't know, I don't know. He came through the window. I don't know if something threw him through the window. If it did, it had to be very large because Gus was a large, heavy dog. I can't get it in my mind that Gus would jump through the window. He knew how to get in the house. I mean, he came to the front. He's not like he'd never been in the house before. He knew the front door. I just do not know why he would jump through the window unless he was just scared to death. And even then, I just don't think a dog would run through a window. You'd think a dog would run for his life, not run towards something that was going to obstruct him.
Now, before this incident, this dog, you couldn't even hardly play with it. It was so aggressive, right?
Right. No, yeah. He was not a dog that you played with.
He was a huge guard dog.
I remember Steve telling me to be real careful around him. Don't startle him. Don't grab him from behind. He pretty much told me not to go around him unless he was there,
Right.
Steve was worried they was going to bite me,
And I think your brother got the dog to deal with what he thought was prowlers messing around the house. So he said
and that's what I was told later on.
He said that he had let the dog out, and he knew the dog went around the house. And I guess you being a kid, you probably, he was probably trying to keep some of this from you, because you're his little brother and all. And,
right.
And as the dog met to the area he thought about where the rock throwing and the hitting in the house and stuff was happening, he said that was, pretty much where the dog met the thing. The incident happened, and the dog was all of a sudden in the house the glass was broke inward. All the glass was
Right.
inside of the room,
Yeah.
and so he knew the glass had broke into the house, and he didn't know the dog was under the bed at first. And he said he found the dog under the bed, looking around, trying to figure out what happened. And
Right.
and then he said something about, I don't know if it was that night or another night, that he ended up getting the gun, and he was after the activity had started in another part of the house. He said, I think he said he heard a growl, and he was running towards the front of the house to get to the door. And just as he was going to go out the door, your mom said, "No, don't go out there." And he heard a growl at the front door. This thing had basically come around the house and was waiting for him at the door to come outside. That's a very scary thing to even ponder.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. I mean, I'm so thankful that I don't have the recollection of something like that, because I don't know how I would have handled it. You know what I mean? It's just.
I mean, we were talking
it's scary
earlier.
enough.
We were talking earlier, and I said the fact that he would know where to go to, and
Right.
what you were doing in the house, and then the way that you went to the front door, and then he went around and was waiting for you. That you said that means they are. What did you say?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that means that they're doing some type of surveillance, or they know they had to be watching the house because they knew where our point of entry is, and if they heard Steve's footsteps, it was not a big house, so if they know where he's coming out by the way, from hearing us moving around inside the house, that means they're around the house listening to us.
All right, Steve. Let's move on from the incident in the house. It seems like to me that the dog went around the house, and it met whatever it was, the Bigfoot, or heck, you never know, might have been Dogman. It met
Right.
this thing in by your mother's room, and I think it swept it up and threw it through the window. Because I'm like you, I just do not see a dog jumping through a window into the
Right.
house and then hiding under the bed. I think it was thrown through and it crawled under the bed. But
Yeah.
it's possible it could have jumped through it, but I just think it thing picked it up and it threw it into the house, and kind of a display of aggression to let you all know that, hey, we're here, and this dog is a big dog, but it's nothing to us Bigfoots,
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. Like a show of dominance. Like, listen,
yeah, but
that dog's not gonna stop me.
yeah. So after that, you was able to play with the dog, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We kept him in the house. Because he was hurt and obviously traumatized. You could tell there was a big difference, a big change in his attitude after that. So he stayed in the house, and we kind of bonded after that. I'd come home after school and take care of him, and he was a totally different dog after that. I mean, he was you could pet him and you could play with him, and but you could tell that something was totally wrong with him. He wasn't the same at all.
Right. It was almost a PTSD thing for the dog. It sounded like the dog was just absolutely traumatized. And as Steve said, the dog never wanted to go out or nothing no more.
He did not. He did not want to go outside. I mean, especially at night. He did not want to go outside at all. Steve would almost have to drag him outside to get him to go.
Wow, that's just amazing. Now the other thing that happened with you and your brother and a friend also that was with you all. From Steve's perspective, you all were walking, I guess, on the property back there somewhere, and there was like a big power line cut where they put the big, power lines up. And he said that he had noticed like a teepee structure out there. But as he said he was walking along, and he said that there was like almost like buzzing like bees. But it was a droning type thing, kind of like one of those diggeroos in
Yeah.
Australia. He said it was going
Right.
kind of a deal like that, but it had like this
Yeah.
buzzing, and he said it was almost putting him into a trance. And there was one point where he noticed it. He's like, like he was noticing this feeling, and it was kind of entrancing him, kind of almost hypnotizing him. And he said he stopped,
Right.
and he said, "Do you hear that?" And right when he said that, he said something roared at you all. And from his
Yeah.
perspective, he picked you up, and the friend was on in front of you all, maybe
Yeah.
20 yards or so. And he said he
Uh-huh.
ran with you back to the house, and the guy ended up showing up later. What
Yeah.
happened to you all, kind
Yeah.
of thing. Now, from your perspective, um, what tell that story from your perspective.
Yeah, pretty much that. It wasn't a telephone line. It was they had ran a big pipeline, like a natural gas or a huge oil pipeline or something. So there was a clearing, just right through the middle of the trees,
Okay.
that followed that pipeline all the way through. So we were walking. When we first started out, we just walked through the woods. We were just messing around, just walking. I remember Steve had a rifle with him, and we were just kind of moseying around. We walked towards the back of the property, and on the way back, we started coming back down that clearing. And, I don't remember any sounds that like Steve heard. What I remember is I was standing to the right of Steve, and we were just walking along. We were walking kind of slow. We weren't. I don't remember us having any kind of conversation or anything. We were just walking, and then all of a sudden, this roar came out of the woods that was so loud it vibrated my body. I mean, I instantly froze. And it was petrified with fear. It was so loud. It was the scariest thing I've ever heard to this day. And as soon as we heard that roar, Steve grabbed me up under his arm and started sprinting back to the house. And he was running as fast as he could, just barreling through everything. We had to cross a little creek, and I remember Steve tossed me over the creek, and I kind of landed on my like my right shoulder, my head, arm area. I landed on my side, but I was in such a panic, and I was so scared. It's like we were both on the same. We knew we were both in survival mode because, I mean, as soon as I hit the ground, I popped back up, and I was standing there waiting for Steve to land. And no sooner did his feet hit the ground that I was reaching up for him, and he picked me back up and ran the rest of the way
So he
to
didn't
the
have to
house.
explain nothing to you then, did he? It's like,
No, we did. I don't remember us saying anything to each other except him just picking me up and we run. And it's like we both knew that we had to get out of there. There was no other choice. We had to get out of there. And we ran to the house. We went inside the house. And I was just petrified. I remember crying. I was shaking, just wondering what the hell that was. Steve had ran the whole way. And Steve he's not a track runner or anything like that. He's a big guy. I even remember him puking, bending over and throwing up. And I asked what happened to Mike, and Steve was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we left him out there. And I wouldn't step outside the front door. I would not go even out in the driveway. But Steve opened the door and went to walk out, and Mike was just moseying up the driveway. You know, and I just remember standing there shaking and being so afraid that whatever that was that just roared at us was not done. You know, it wanted. I felt like it was still going to come after us. You know, but
Right.
that roar was something that I will never forget ever. It was so loud. I mean, I actually felt it in my chest and like through my whole body, resonated through my whole body, and instantly, I froze. It scared me so bad that I instantly froze. There's no way I could have. Thank God for Steve. And you know, they say everybody reacts different to fight or flight type deal. But thank God Steve snatched me up and got us out of there, because if I would have been alone, I would have just been stuck in fear, just stuck there. I don't think I could have moved if he wouldn't have grabbed me and took off.
Right. It
You know,
sounds.
and I've
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
You go
No,
ahead.
you're fine. Okay, I was just going to say that over the years I've tried to, you know, when I was a teenager and the internet was around, I always wanted to know what that was. It's always been in my head. What the hell? What roared at us like that? And so my first thing was, I remember somebody saying that there was like a big cat or exotic animal place, you know, in a town that wasn't too far away, but you know, it was still 15 miles away. I think maybe somebody was just trying to tell me that so I wouldn't, you know, just trying to calm my nerves so I would go outside and play and not be petrified. But I searched and tried to, you know, first thing I thought of was, okay, well, it must have been a lion. So I listened for, you know, looked on recordings of lions, and that just wasn't it. I mean, all the lion recordings I've heard, they let out a roar, but they're taking a breath. You know, it's kind of like, it's not a solid. This was a solid, loud, vibrating. It was so deep. I mean, the bass of it was so. Oh, it was so scary.
Yeah. Listen, yeah, I know what you mean. Look, I heard a roar in Texas, and it was so long of a roar.
Right.
It was like, oh my gosh. It was so scary. It was the scariest thing I've ever had happen to me. And
Yeah.
believe me, dude, I have had physical confrontations with things that aren't human in my lifetime. Okay,
Right.
and I have proof of it. You know, I mean, I had someone walk in on it one time and saw this thing. It had a hold of me even, and was lifting me up and pulling me towards, you know, towards the wall and what have you. And it, you know, it
Right.
wasn't a human being at all. And whether people want to believe it or not, I really don't care. That was a very
Right. Yeah.
scary
Exactly.
thing. And I've had another incident where something got a hold of me, and it looked kind of human, except for it wasn't totally. It wasn't like us, I can tell you that. And had a real long nose
Right.
and stuff. But this roar that I heard, I remember thinking, I don't want to see this, because if you were to see it, you'd die. I thought you would
Yeah.
die if you even looked at it. And I'm not joking. I mean, I cannot even express to people how long the roar was, how deep. The
Yeah.
closest thing I've ever heard is on Jurassic Park when the T-Rex roars, but that still doesn't even get it, because it was
So.
deeper than that.
Right.
It was deeper and
Exactly.
longer. It was, you
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
I,
You just can't explain it. It's hard to explain, but
yeah.
it's there and it happened and it was terrifying.
Did you even want to see what made it, the sound?
No. No. I mean, that's why I think we were like, you know, just slowly walking, because I don't think we were talking because I had my head down. And once it roared, I looked up. I don't remember seeing Mike. I don't remember seeing anything in particular. I just remember looking up and seeing the trees in the woods, and then Steve grabbing me. You know what I mean? He grabbed me up under his arm like I was a football, and just we were running. We were gone.
Yeah. And knowing that there was something out there that made that sound,
Mm-hmm.
are you comfortable like sleeping in a tent out in the woods or something by yourself?
Yeah, I'm very. I was in the military, so I've had to be out in the woods, and I've never been a big hunter. But then again, every time I've been out in the woods camping and stuff, it's always been in a well-populated area. I don't think, even with the arsenal I have, that I would go out in the woods down there, or anywhere, honestly, because if they're in small town Oklahoma, they could be anywhere. It's always in the back of my mind. I can't. It's always in the back of my mind. I work. There's about 8,000 acres of property where I work, and I do not like going out anywhere by myself. I mean, I do it, but it's always in the back of my mind that there is something out there that if it can roar like that, then it has to be very menacing and very powerful.
Yeah, I mean the sound has to match what it looks like. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
whatever the hell made that sound. You know that was
You're
the
right.
alpha predator for sure. It's like,
For
dude,
sure.
there's
Yeah.
no
Exactly.
question. Yeah, man. Do you
Yeah.
think it was infrasound? Something like
I don't know. I know that I felt it in my body. I know that. I don't know if it was just from the volume. Like I say, it was so loud, and it blows my mind that Mike says that he didn't hear it, because people at 2 counties away should have heard it. It was so loud.
yeah, I know. That's crazy, dude. Because when I had that experience too, where the roar, it was so crazy loud to me. I was yelling for someone who was nearby to come to me, and he didn't hear it. And I was like, what the heck? How in the hell could you not have heard that? That was amazingly loud. And you say it shook your body.
It
So it
shook
seems
my
like
body. I felt it in my insides.
yeah, it seems like it's a unidirectional, like it can be targeted to a specific area. Your brother heard it, but he wasn't frozen. It seems like you were the target.
It definitely, like I say, we were standing right next to each other. I mean, within arm's length. Steve always had me within arm's length. He's always been very protective, and I was comfortable like that. I knew that my brother was right next to me.
Right.
Even before this happened, because coyotes, hearing coyotes as a kid cackling and going on, Steve probably told me this, and or somebody told me that when you'd hear coyotes out there, all together yipping and stuff, they always told me it was a pack of wild Apache Indians coming to scalp little kids, so I always thought there was something after to get me. But so I was always right next to Steve no matter where we went.
Yeah.
But that would make sense if they can focus it, because it was so powerful and so, airwaves is what you feel when there's bass and subwoofers. Something is vibrating the air, and that's what you feel when you hear, a loud subwoofer or something like that. That's the air pulsating. So if they could focus that would that would make sense because that's how they can point it at you, and that's how you can feel it. I don't know how else you would feel it if that's what blows my mind is something that powerful to make that volume of sound that resonates your body. How does it do that? You know what I mean? It's not. It can't be natural.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know lions have got a version of it. They can roar at like a rabbit, and then it'll make the rabbit freeze, and they can go pounce it. But for something to roar so bad that it shakes a human and freezes them, I interviewed one lady I remember, and I asked her about the sound, and she said, "I can tell you this: it'll freeze you in your tracks when they growl or they can roar or growl, and it will freeze you in your tracks." So it could be a hunting thing if they could. I mean,
they had to develop it somehow.
Yeah, I mean, if they roared like that at an animal, I think it would freeze the animal, and they could go pounce it.
That makes sense.
Sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At least it gives them a certain advantage. You know, even if they do that to a deer, and a deer is afraid and stands still for 2 to 5 seconds longer than it normally would, that gives this animal or creature the ability. It gives it another advantage. You know what I mean? Right. So it has to be something that a technique that they developed for hunting. It's the only thing that makes sense. It's just something that they developed, and they can scare the shit out of you with it. You know, there's no other way to put it. They can scare you to death.
Now you've been in the military, right?
Right. Yes, sir.
Was there anything in your military experience even come close to being that scary?
No. I've never been that scared in my life. You know, I mean, I was in the Army, but and I have to say, I never went to war or anything like that. I was in an aviation unit overseas in Germany, so I never had to go to Iraq or anything. But you know, nothing ever. I've never been that scared in my life ever. Nothing's ever scared me like that scared me.
Right.
I mean, it stuck with me all these years. I mean, it's something that's always been in the back of my mind, and it's a question that I will go to my grave wondering what roared at us that day, and why did it roar at us? That's another question I've always had. What made it roar? Was it, were we getting too close to its area? Did it think Steve had that rifle? You know, did Steve pose the biggest threat, and is that why it roared at us and why we only heard it? You know, was it a warning? I just don't know why it did that, but I know it did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and one thing was kind of strange about it is when your brother was telling it, he said he was hearing this buzzing kind of vibrating type of sound, a droning type sound, and it was almost putting him into a La La Land kind of trance. And it was when he snapped, he kind of shakes his head and he's like, "Do you hear that?" He said that's when it roared. So it made me kind of wonder if it was targeting you two, and it was trying to lure you in somehow, doing something to you. And then when he snapped out of it, it roared. Yeah, I mean, just a thought, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any, you know, I don't have any memory of that, but that's why I say it was so, it just came out of the blue. There was no warning that something's about to roar you. We were just walking, and, you know, I don't remember Steve saying anything, and I don't think he got it out. I think he was just thinking it, you know. Like you said, he was just coming to the realization that, hey, I'm hearing that noise. Is it me? Is it in my head? You know, what is that? You're starting to question what that was, and then it roared.
Yeah, it almost sounds like that it uses I think it was a Bigfoot, is what I think it was Sasquatch. So And it could have been a dog man situation. I don't know. It was one
Yeah.
of the two because I don't know of anything else that can make that type of sound.
Right.
That's that's already out in the woods. And but your brother having this gun, that's what I want people to understand. This roar is such a loud and scary sound that your brother didn't even think about trying to use that gun, did he?
No, no, not at all. And Steve is Steve's a big scary man on his own. Even as a teenager, people have told me all my life, you don't mess with your brother Steve, and I've seen it hand to hand. He will stand and fight. Well, unless it's a wasp. I've never seen a grown man scream and run from a wasp like he does. But like you said, he'd rather come across a bear in the woods and have to fight it with his bare hands than fight a wasp. But like I said, it's just his thing. He would stand and fight. He's not a runner, and not much scares him. But that thing put the fear of God into us, where he just snatched me up and he was gone. He knew that we had to get out of there. It wasn't, hey, let's just figure out what that was.
Yeah.
It wasn't something where we were just walking through the woods and we heard a noise and we're like, oh, I wonder what that was. Let's go try to figure out what that was.
Yeah.
This was something where it scared me to my core. And it had to scare Steve because he automatically picked me up. He knew he was afraid for my life, and he went into big brother mode and snatched me up, and we were gone.
Right. Yeah. Well,
It was crazy. It was just super intense, man. I just can't describe how intense it was.
Right.
Even for my little mind.
Yeah, that's what I was wanting to kind of convey to people about that sound. That it's nothing. I mean, most of the time, if you heard coyote bark or not, make a sound, what I'm saying, a yelp or heard a wolf or even a bear growl, you're going to look and try to find where it's at. But when you hear this sound, you don't care. You know it's time to get out of there. You don't want to see it. You know what I mean? It's a whole different ball game. There's nothing else like
different.
it.
Nothing. I've heard big cat and I don't know what it was. People have told me it's cougar or whatever, but I've heard them screaming where it sounds like like a woman getting murdered. And I can't recall what kind of big cat that does that, but I've heard that out in in the middle of the night. Here's this screaming coming from the woods. And it's a god awful sound, and you wonder what it is, but it still doesn't put you in the state of mind where you're so afraid you can't move. It's just like, wow, there's something out there screaming and making that noise, but this was not that. This was so intense that when we heard it, I froze. I mean, I was.
It was run for your life.
No other questions.
It was basically fight or flight, but you fly. It's a run for your life. You're in danger.
That's what I say. That's why I think like Steve and I did not talk to each other, but we both knew that we had to get out of there. Like I said, I landed on my head, but I popped right back up, and I was reaching up for him, waiting for him to land.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because you would most of the time, if you were going to take a 5 or 6-year-old kid somewhere and you were going to do something like that, you would explain to the kid what I need you to do. You knew what to do because it's like, I'm going to get up and reach for him because he's coming across that creek.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was crazy, man. It's something I'll never ever forget. And I didn't talk. Well, we didn't talk about it. I mean, like I said, he is so much older than me. So by the time I was at 10 years old, he was already moved out. and and we didn't talk about it, and I didn't honestly remember if it was. I didn't know if it was so traumatic to him. I didn't even know if he remembered it or what his thoughts on it until I was probably in my late teens, early 20s, and we were sitting around. And I said, "Do you remember when we were walking in the woods and something roared at us?" And he was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." And we started talking about it, but it's something that I'll never ever forget, and I'll go to my grave wanting to know. And like I say, after all these years, the only conclusion I can come to is that a Bigfoot. I don't know anything about Dogman, and it's not like I know anything about Bigfoot, but it's the only thing that makes sense to me. It's the only thing that I can rationalize that it could be.
Well, after collecting so many of these stories, I'm telling you that it was 99% sure it was a Bigfoot, and there's a little chance it could have been a Dogman. But they typically growl. They don't typically roar. They more growl, and they can do the same thing to you with the growl. But so I'm almost sure it was a Bigfoot, and
hey man, I'm sorry, my wife's blowing up my phone trying to get a hold of me.
I think we're done here, and well, thank you for sharing. And
hey man, thank you. I appreciate all your insight, buddy.
All right, bye bye.
Thanks, bye.
I hope you enjoyed that, and I will put a link in the card. So if you tap the screen on YouTube, it'll give you a little dot up in the right corner of the screen. Click that dot. It'll give you a drop-down menu. I will put the story from his brother's perspective in the cards there. I'll give you that in a playlist and some other stuff. But it is something, I think I titled it something like Oklahoma Farm and Terrorized, something like that is in the title. So I hope you go check that one out, because it is a fascinating story, and it sounds like to me that it very much scared this kid at 6 years old to the level that he never forgot it, for sure. And it's one of my favorite stories, with the dog being thrown through the window, or maybe jumping, but I think it was thrown. And if you listen to Steve's version of it, you get a lot more detail from his perspective, and he surely does remember a lot more of it. Thank you all for listening. If anyone has a story out there they want to share, you can send it to me at brentonson@gmail.com. If you want to contribute to help me with this making of this show and to help keep things running, I very much appreciate that. And you can go to a link in the description, PayPal me. Click that. It's super easy to use, and you can make a contribution there. Thank you all. God bless, and see you all on the next video. Bye.
Don't you say another hurting word. I see it in your eyes. You'll be moving on. I don't know what it is. It happens every time. One storm's rolling in, another's passing by. You say you really love me, but we knew it had to end. I never thought I'd ever have to hear those words again. I don't need another friend. Your heart is what I want. Critical fail, hopeless cause. Say another word. I see it in your eyes. You'll be moving on. Don't know what it is. It happens every one's moving in, another's passing by.